We forecast prices and fundamentals. Whether you're a trader, producer, or consumer, you can hedge your bets with Montel's diverse forecasting portfolio. Contact us at sales@montelnews.com for more info and a free trial.
Hello listeners and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast, bringing energy matters in an informal setting. This week we turn to the Nordic market. We have seen a collapse in prices, even negative prices. The market is oversupplied and the mild weather is showing no sign of abating. Companies are struggling to post profits in this environment. How long will this last? Helping me to answer this and many other questions is Sigbjorn Seland, Chief Analyst at StormGeo. A warm welcome to you, Sigbjorn, and welcome back to the pod.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Happy to be back.
Excellent. Now, I thought we could start by current prices and current market development. So what's happening here? I mean, we're seeing very, very low prices, on some days even negative. What's going on?
Yeah, well, it's a combination of very, very strong hydrological situation for sure, and also this very significant growth in wind power production in the Nordic region. The combined effect seems to give record low prices this year.
How about COVID? Has that had an effect at all on the markets? Or is it all fundamentals?
It's, let's say, 99% fundamentals maybe and 1% COVID. COVID has, well, if you look at electricity consumption right now, I would say it's more or less at the same level as 1 year ago. So in that sense, it seems that the effect of COVID has disappeared. Maybe in Q2 and Q3 we saw some negative impact on electricity consumption, maybe some 3 to 4% year-on-year decrease, but that consumption is now back again. So weather is much more important than COVID for sure for the Nordic power market.
I mean, the weather's always been very important for the Nordic market, but absolutely crucial. We'll return to the wind power development in the Nordic market, but I think if we can look at what your expectations are for next year, will this annus horribilis, will we see a repeat of this?
In a way, we all know how volatile prices are in a hydropower system as the Nordic. This year, system price will be around 10 euros per megawatt hour. Last year, 2019, it was around 39. But for sure, the odds have developed very significantly towards very low prices also for next year and coming few years for sure. The main reason for this is mainly wind power, which is growing very fast. And just to give some figures again, in 2019, the combined wind and solar power production in the Nordic region was 47 terawatt hours, and in 2021 we expect 78 terawatt hours, and in 2022 93 terawatt hours. It's a very massive growth, I would say, and the investments behind this growth is almost entirely decided. So that growth is more or less given, I would say. That's
incredible. That's almost a doubling over 2 to 3 years.
It is. And I think to be frank, it's a bit of a surprise to everybody, I would say. If you go back 2-3 years, I don't think anybody expected growth to be so massively. And it's in a market with no electricity consumption growth. At least for now, we don't see that. So the power surplus is growing very fast. No matter what happens to consumption the next few years, we are developing towards a very, very large power surplus, for sure.
But this onset of wind will then, in a sense, just drive prices lower. I mean, that's a fair assumption, unless there's a very dry year, of course.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, isn't there a bit of a cannibalizing effect on the prices here, of these projects? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
For sure, it is. That's a natural factor in this. Any new investment in wind power cannibalize on all previous investments, but that effect is, at least up until now, very slow, I would say. You still see that a marginal wind power project typically achieves well above 90% of the baseload price in the price area it is located. But there is a trend towards, or you see this cannibalization taking place, but in this sense, it doesn't impact this enormous power surplus. The energy is already built. So, and as you said, other things equal, obviously it means lower prices. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, Sigbjorn, so if we look at next year, I mean, can things get worse in terms of prices?
Yeah.
For the producers, I mean, right? Maybe from the consumers, it's a very positive sign that prices are very low, of course. And we mustn't forget industry, yeah?
Definitely. It can become much worse, I would say. Are starting or ending this year with a close to record strong hydrological situation. So if next year turns out to be another wet year, we will definitely see lower prices next year than this year. So in our analysis, it's close to 50% probability that we will see even lower prices next year.
And even more instances of negative prices as well, Sigbjorn?
No, I don't think so. That said, I really didn't expect to see negative prices in the system price at all. But we had the first incident a few weeks ago. It was a Monday morning, and I suspect that has, let's say, some markets, some hydropower producers were a bit off guard or lazy or whatever. But when we have seen it, in a way, you can say it's a sure thing that it will happen again, but it will be a very, very rare happening occasion, and it could be years until next time.
We've become used to them in Germany and maybe in Denmark, but it's for the system price. That's as you say, it's very, very rare, and it's like
as long as you have hydro power in the market clearing, there's no reason to see prices below zero because they don't have negative margin costs.
Absolutely.
It's as easy as that, and it's still there will be market power in the market clearing for many years to come. So in that sense, I would say that it takes another incident, or it shouldn't happen. But I guess since it has happened, it will happen again.
Absolutely. What's the impact on the power producers here? I mean, we've seen in the Q3 numbers that have come out from the financial results that a lot of them are really struggling here. I mean, if what you're saying is correct, that there's a high probability of even lower prices next year, then the situation could get worse for some of these power producers.
Absolutely. For sure, some are better off than others. Those with active hedging programs can probably survive a year or two with these low prices, but I guess many hydropower producers have not hedged too much of their production, and for sure they will have very bad numbers this year and coming years, no question about it. So
it seems to be 2020 won't be remembered very fondly then, will it? I mean, you got very, very, very low collapsing prices as well as the COVID situation. So
let's hope 2020 is a low in many aspects, but prices are volatile in the Nordic power market for sure. But I wouldn't be too optimistic if I was an unhedged hydropower producer, to be frank.
No, absolutely. This year, next year, we'll see interconnectors coming online. We're seeing the Nordlink, which is, recently said it would be delayed by only a week or so. But and then next year, the North Sea link to the UK. What impact would these have on the market here? Will these come to the rescue of the producers so they can export out of Norway, or what's your view here, Sigbjorn?
I think for those who hope that those interconnectors will be a rescue, I think they will be disappointed in a way, at least regarding Nordlink, because we know now about the minimum capacity that will be applied fairly often, I guess. You have the internal bottlenecks in Germany, and you have also bottlenecks in southern Norway. So in our analysis, it's a very modest sort of relief from Nordlink isolated. We do not expect to see very much energy exported through Nordlink the next coming years. But on the margin, it will be a positive thing, but related or in comparison to it's happening on the supply side with all this wind power, it's peanuts in a way. For the UK sea cable, things look a bit better for sure. Prices in general are a bit higher in UK, and you don't have, or at least it doesn't seem to be the same problems with bottlenecks in UK, and so you do not expect to see, or we expect to see the capacity available for the market in general on the UK sea cable as opposed to Norlink. So power will flow more out of NO2 there. But as we see in UK, you have quite a lot of hours over a year would be very low, close to zero and negative prices in Germany, where you will not see export from NO2 to Germany anyway. And there is a tendency towards the same in UK. Prices are more volatile. You build a lot of intermittent production capacity in UK as well, and there's a growing number of hours with very low prices also in UK, where you won't see export from NO2 in those hours. So definitely you should expect, I would say, a significant energy export on the UK cable, but far from like maximum capacity. And again, even if there will be several terawatt hours exported on the UK cable, it's relatively small numbers compared to this wind power growth.
This pod is being recorded with, it's obviously the challenges of the COVID times. We're hearing your assistant in the background here, Sigbjorn, but it's that's fine. That's only natural. You know, I often get interrupted by my daughters here, but it's just for the listeners who maybe
sorry.
highlights very much the fact that we are, you know, we're true professionals doing this from our kitchens, under the stairs. You know, we're still being able to talk about the power flows between these countries. But do you think then these cables will be used for imports primarily? Or, I mean, not primarily, but there'll be more, people will be surprised at how much will actually be potentially imported from Germany and the UK?
It's difficult to know really what is the sort of general expectation to power flows, but the Nordic region and NO2 is a surplus area, so it will be mainly export. But there are many factors limiting the potential for energy export. So I'm just saying I wouldn't be too optimistic regarding these cables to sort of be the big relief for the market. Yeah,
absolutely. So you've talked about the wind, you know, the huge growth in wind power in the Nordics, but you talked about 2-3 year time frame. What happens sort of in the medium term here, Sigbjorn? Do you expect this to continue, even despite the background of maybe challenging prices?
No, I don't think so. So there will be a supply growth until 2023, 2024, I would say, for sure. But we see that the investment decisions are fewer and fewer. So I think the investors are definitely impacted by what's going on in the market, and investment decision is harder to reach. So the growth will slow down for sure, or I would expect that, because the market is oversupplied already. So if we see a continued stream of investment decision, it will just prolong the period of a very a power surplus being problematically large and just inducing very high probability of extremely low prices. So the natural thing for sure would be to see that supply side growth slowing down for sure.
Are there any growth areas? I know that in Norway it's quite challenging politically. There's a lot of sort of grassroots opposition to this, but there are maybe Finland or northern Sweden that are more areas where you could see more growth?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there is, I guess, there is still more than 30 terawatt hours with investment decision or under construction regarding onshore wind power. And most of that is in Sweden and Finland for sure. There will be quite a lot coming into production next year in Norway, but beyond 2021 with this let's say strong NIMBY factor in Norway. This is not in my backyard factor, and this new licensing regime that is put on hold or not in place. So you will not see probably more onshore wind power in Norway for 10 to 15 years. That's what we expect at least. But you don't see the same obstacles in Sweden and in Finland. So So there is definitely a significant potential to continue building wind power there. But beyond what we see already decided, we expect to see things slowing down.
And what about sort of floating or offshore wind here? Do you expect this to be a growth area?
I see that like the financial community is arguing heavily on floating offshore wind power, in particular, to become a sort of a growth industry for Norway. It might be, but both bottom fixed and floating rely still quite heavily on subsidies and will be, as we see it, for many years. So that's more, in a way, a political discussion than whether you should see growth there or not. The market in itself, at least in the current circumstances, will not start building offshore wind power.
And an issue that's often discussed together with offshore wind, or even onshore wind, is green hydrogen. Seems to be a bit of a hot topic at the moment, maybe a bit of hot air, but how do you see this developing in the Nordics?
It's a hot topic for sure, and I guess hydrogen probably will be a game changer in the long term, but it's still quite a few years into the future. But for sure, it's a massive potential. And we just yesterday could read about this LKAB's estimates of more than 50 terawatt hours of new electricity consumption during the next 2 decades due to the use of green hydrogen. And this hybrid project being a part of that, which I guess you should expect to see realized, and that has a potential of some 23 terawatt hours. Hydrogen is for sure in the long term a potential rescue factor for an oversupplied market. And I think most factors point towards hydrogen becoming very important and significant for sure, but years ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have Equinor, for example. I mean, they're becoming more and more involved in offshore wind, both in the UK and on the continent, and then they have all the infrastructure, the gas infrastructure. So in a sense, that's a perfect fit for some companies like them to develop green hydrogen. But I thought I could then ask, to follow from what you're talking there about the potential growth in electrification, an increase in consumption demand in the Nordics that comes from electrifying even, or the electrification of the heating and transport sectors. I mean, is this going to be a game changer and absorb some of this extra surplus that you're talking about, Sigbjorn?
Yeah, I think so. But again, that's in the long run. If you look at figures, you see that there currently is no consumption growth going on, and it hasn't been for decades. Again, it's a fairly consensus in a way that this green shift will induce massive electricity consumption growth. The electrification of sectors like you mentioned transport and oil and gas and hydrogen, and it's sort of easy to point to triggers for electricity consumption growth, but the big question is how fast will it develop? And so far, it's in a way it's all forecasted. Nothing hard facts, or more or less nothing yet. So we need to see consumption growth picking up very soon, I would say, unless otherwise this supply side growth will be too big to handle even in normal hydrological circumstances. A
final question, Sigbjorn. You mentioned wind and solar earlier. I mean, we don't really think of the Nordic region as a very sunny region. What do you mean? Does solar have potential here as well?
It's still small. Maybe in energy terms, maybe 2 terawatt hours of solar power production in the Nordic region now. But it's close to 1 terawatt hours with final investment decision for solar power. And even if numbers are small, growth rates are very, very high. And conditions are not bad. And when you look at investment cost for solar power, how fast it is decreasing. We actually, in our analysis already from 2027, we see more investments in solar power than in wind power in the Nordic region. So it's definitely a major factor in not many years into the future, I would say.
Excellent. So So should I install solar panels on my roof, Sigbjorn, here in Oslo?
Prices will decrease for sure. So when to do the investment?
Yeah.
I haven't done that calculation myself, but I think I would wait a year or two. But at some point, I'm sure I will have solar panels on my roof.
Exactly. To charge up the electric car in the garage.
Yeah.
Sigbjorn, perfect. Thank you very much indeed for joining the Montel Weekly podcast this week.
Happy to join you.
That's all for the podcast this week, listeners. You can now follow us on Twitter on the Montel Weekly podcast account. You can direct message any suggestions or questions. You can also send us an email to podcast@montelnews.com. Lastly, remember to keep up to date with all that's happening in the energy markets on Montel News. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from. And please rate us and leave a review if you can. That helps us to improve. Thank you and goodbye.